Let's continue where we have left. We were talking on the CPC, MC, and CM. I mean C dash M dash dash processes. And the first one was the process at which the value is created. The value is created because inputs are turned into outputs, and basically those commodities, the sale of those commodities is the main purpose. I mean, the main, the main function of the economy is turning, raw materials, initial resources into more useful things, and within this process, CPC is showing this transformation process. But from the capitalist perspective, then there is a process of selling what they have produced, and there's a process of buying the inputs of their production, which of course also includes the raw machinery and the infrastructure. And both of these processes are costly for the capitalists. These are not processes where value is created, because value is created when you produce something more useful by spending the labor power to produce that thing that is more useful. But still, the selling process and the selling process and this buying process has its costs. Well, this creates opportunity for new type of capitalists in the capitalist system, and their function is basically compared with a typical capitalist, which focuses on the production process. That can be production of a service also. These two basically are focusing on the reducing cost of the buying and selling processes. So since they are able to reduce the costs by being able to push those costs to those companies that are focusing on buying and selling process, the initial company which is focusing on the production process is able to reduce the cost, and because it reduces the cost, it can sell the commodity it produces not at the price to which it could sell the commodity to the consumer, but at a smaller price, and as a result, it can be saved from the selling cost. Similarly, I mean, here it might let's say get the money from the financial system and pay some cost to that financial system, but by doing that, it will basically reduce the cost of raising its own money to buy the inputs, basically. The type of capitalists that are focusing on the MC process are called financial capitalists, and capital used for that purpose is called financial capital. The CPC this is the companies that are focusing on this process are actually called the industrial capitalists, and the companies that are focusing on the selling process are called commercial capitalists, or sometimes also merchant capitalists. Merchant capitalists and the financial capitalists don't produce anything. They are not productive, but they are reducing the costs, as we have said before. We have already told on this. I mean, strictly speaking, of course, by the way, merchant capitalists might produce certain things like, for example, they can produce catalogs, they can produce internet services. So they can produce certain services which might help you to buy what you want or learn characteristics of the product what you want. But mainly what they do is they bring all the products together. They bring it nearer to the consumers, and they put it into a more, for example, without them, you need to go to first meat producer and then meat the producer that produces the meat, and then producers that are producing soda. But they bring everything together, so you can basically by buying them the different products you might need together, where you might buy those products, so that you can just go to one store and buy everything you need. Well, the same thing might be true for example, when you buy a car, different models might be brought together into the same place, or maybe even certain services, certain special, let's say, deals might be given to the buyers. So these institutions at any form, for example, in the form of Amazon or in the form of Best Buy, for example, or eBay, they are specialized on selling and know how to do selling better. And by doing that, as I said, they might produce better services. But the main point is, as they are specialized on selling, they make selling process easier, and that is what justifies their existence. So, well, in theory, it seems they seem almost like companies where which just buy commodities and sell those commodities for money. But basically, this exists because they reduce the cost of the selling process. As a result, they are able to get the commodity for less money from the industrial capitalists because of the reduction of the selling costs, and sell it to more money to the customers, for which the certain selling services are provided for less cost, basically, let's say. So, what are the costs of the MC process? Well, actually, as I said before, the main point is raising the money in the MC process. The main cost that creates the financial capitalists. The actual buying process doesn't have. At least Marx doesn't focus on the risks of the buying process. Are there certain sellers that are buying that specialize on buying the input materials for the companies? Maybe to some extent. They might be looking as merchant capitalists. There is one particular type which is the case of buying labor in mass and then selling it to the companies, and that's the subcontractor labor companies. For example, certain companies, when you want to work with them, they actually want you to sign up as worker of a different company, and those company, you might never see that company, and you might never actually, as far as you know, your relation might be with the first company, but the second company is an expert of hiring workers and reducing the labor costs. So the main company might want you to deal with this subcontractor company, which is able to deal with the workers in a more efficient way and reduce the costs of dealing with the workers, basically. But here, of course, we won't talk on that. We will talk on the case of raising money and the costs that are created by the problem of raising money. So the main problem that creates the cost of raising money is the turnover time. Turnover time is basically the time which basically an average company needs to get the initial money capital, buy with it commodities, make the production, and sell back the commodities and get the money. Of course, for basic inputs like electricity or wood, this process might be relatively shorter if the company is immediately sell its outputs and production doesn't take. I mean, in some cases, for example, if you produce a house, it might take a year or 2 years. But this is not the case. Basically, you might get the money for those inputs immediately, or not relatively at a shorter time, not immediately, of course. But note that also the machinery and the infrastructure is also part of the inputs. And sometimes you use a machinery or a building for tens of years, which means, and during those years, its value is added piecemeally to the outputs. That means, in order to get the money back you have paid for a building or machinery, you might sometimes need 10 years, sometimes 20 years, basically. So the actual turnover is the time when you get your whole money capital back, and for certain inputs, getting the money, you can get the money back faster. For certain inputs, it takes time. Marx claims, well, of course, if turnover time in capitalism was decreasing continuously, the capitalists would be able to get the profit faster, and that could be even a trend that could be counteract with the falling rate of profits. Because if the turnover is faster, you get less profit, but you get it at more frequently. I mean, getting the same profit rate for 10 times a week might be better, even if the profit rate is low, compared with the case where you get the profit only once a week or once a month or once a year, basically. So, but Marx argues that the turnover time in capitalism remains constant, and the reason is the two type of inputs, raw materials, for which, I mean, as production gets faster and faster, the raw materials, you can get the money you have paid for raw materials faster. However, the fixed inputs, machinery and infrastructure, they are started to be used for a longer and longer time, and as you use them for a longer time, the time you need to get the money paid for them will be longer. Well, according to Marx, the main point is the raw materials. I mean, the speeding up production process, which makes you get the money you pay for raw materials faster, is balanced by first relatively longer time you need to get the inputs, and also the fact that more and more fixed inputs are used in the production compared with the raw materials. So relative amount of fixed inputs used in production increase over time, according to Marx. Note that these fixed inputs are not same as the constant capital. Both raw materials and fixed inputs are part of the constant capital, but here actually Marx divides the constant capital itself into two different parts. And in Capital Volume 2, he talks on this fixed inputs and raw materials in more detail. So now, what is the cost created by the turnover time? Basically, the main cost arises because turnover time